Maybe you haven't noticed, but Washington is occupied by neocons. Seeking world domination, they are steering the U.S. empire toward endless wars abroad, and back at home, they feed us with an illusion of freedom, democracy, and choice presented by the two-party system. Now, they may seem like two distinct parties, but make no mistake about it, the Democratic and Republican parties function more like a single party that promotes the interests of corporations, special interest groups, and foreign governments, all of which profit from more war and human exploitation. But perhaps nowhere are the similarities more striking than the past two neocon administrations to occupy the White House. The grand old party's George W. Bush declared the war on terror, then gave the world the Iraq War, Guantanamo Bay, CIA black sites, and a drone program, among a host of other ills. And seizing on the American people's weariness of military adventurism abroad, Barack Obama got himself on the Democratic ticket in 2008, campaigning on a platform of change and hope. But that change never really came to pass. Obama, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, dropped over 23,000 bombs on the Middle East in 2015 alone. Guantanamo remains open, and Bush's drone program across Africa and the Middle East has grown even more deadly. Obama even out-Bushed W by expanding the war on terror to benefit the military-industrial complex. He allowed for the strengthening of extreme right-wing militias and governments, the emboldening of Gulf monarchies and apartheid Israel, and the development of a foreign policy agenda that's ironically become increasingly aligned with our sworn enemy, Al-Qaeda. Sure, the Iran deal was finally secured under Obama, but the Russian bear was also provoked under his watch with the destabilization of Ukraine, reigniting the Cold War. Now, here to talk to me more about the neocon Republicans and Democrats pulling the strings in Washington is Daniel McAdams, director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace, a nonpartisan initiative led by former politicians, policy advisors, and even former Bush aides who oppose U.S. interventionism and work to educate the public about the neocon takeover of America. And I began by asking him who exactly are the neocons working behind the scenes, and how did they get so deeply embedded in Washington? Take a look.
Well, we could talk a long time about the origins of the neocons. Intellectually, they began in New York, in a small part of New York, many decades ago. And they came out of very left-wing Trotskyite circles. They slowly migrated from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. There, of course, was a big migration under Reagan, where they found themselves all of a sudden placed in positions of relative power. I don't know whether I don't think Reagan was a neocon for all of his other faults, but I think he was certainly infiltrated by the neocon establishment. They have continued in their positions. As a matter of fact, the second generation of neocons, Bill Kristol, who of course is the son of Irving Kristol, John Podhoretz, whose father, of course, is one of the original neocons. The second generation has taken over, and now we're actually seeing a third generation of neocons, the younger, much more aggressive group of neocons. And these are people like Eli Lake, Jamie Kirchick, Michael Weiss. Foreign Policy Initiative is one of their home bases. That was originally the Project for a New American Century, PNAC, which was Bill Kristol's outfit, which their big role was in pushing the Iraq War. Starting in the mid-90s, they were pushing for this war. And then, of course, as soon as 9/11 happened, most of the Pentagon wanted to attack Afghanistan, but the neocons said, no, forget that. We need to go after Iraq. So why are they so dangerous? Because they promote war. They promote what they call democracy at the barrel of a U.S. gun. It causes millions of people to be not only killed, but maimed and have their lives ruined overseas. Thousands of Americans die in their ridiculous no-win wars. And it also has emptied the U.S. economy of trillions of dollars. So they're hell-bent on bankrupting our country, creating thousands and millions of new enemies overseas. They don't keep us safe. They make things worse. Unfortunately, they still dominate Washington.
And how does the two-party system encourage or even fulfill this neocon agenda for more war?
Well, neocons, in a way, can be very good chameleons. They are certainly comfortable in either party, and they love to whisper in the ears of people in power. Um, Look, even just in the Obama administration, you see several prominent neocons. Let's just look at Victoria Nuland, who was the Assistant Secretary of State for Europe. Very, very important and powerful position. Well, she served as a top advisor to Dick Cheney, who everyone knows as a top neocon. She seamlessly moved over to the Obama administration, and she's the one who got us mixed up in this overthrow of the Ukrainian government, which has not turned out very well at all. Her husband, ironically enough, Robert Kagan, is from a whole family of neocons, and Kagan was, of course, the top advisor in the Bush administration, and then he went over to advise Hillary Clinton in the State Department. So you see them prominently in the Republican Party, but I think there's a group that will go equally to either party, but there's also a group that you see predominantly in the Democratic Party, and these would be called liberal interventionists, R2P people, responsibility to protect people. They have the same philosophy, which is that you must use force to remake the world in our image. And these people would be like Susan Rice, Samantha Power, the U.S. ambassador to the UN. They're the ones who would be explaining the bombing of Syria or the undermining of Syria, the attack on Libya. They would be explaining it not in terms of realpolitik, but it's going to be good for the local people. Well, I think if you ask anyone who's been liberated in Libya how they like their wonderful new country, they won't answer, "Thank you very much, neocons. Thank you, liberal interventionists." The same is true in Iraq. So they easily migrate to all parties that are considered the experts in Washington, sadly enough, and strangely and crazily enough, because they're always wrong about everything.
Right, and I'm really glad you mentioned that because now, from what I'm following, the Ron Paul Institute of Peace has been one of the most outspoken organizations against U.S. wars and empire building, and has even gone as far as to reject the hate and xenophobia and Islamophobia being spewed by so many so-called liberty-minded individuals like Donald Trump and Alex Jones. This, of course, is not just a phenomenon that has, hit the liberty movement, but also the new atheist leftist movement. So why are people on the left and the right latching on to such a divide and conquer tactic by the establishment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think our tactic at the Ron Paul Institute would be whatever the opposite of divide and conquer is, because as you point out, we brought in not only people from the Bush administration, I'm thinking particularly of the Leverets, who were both in the national security establishment in the Bush administration. They resigned in protest over the Iraq War. There were several others. We also have Dennis Kucinich, who's a well-known progressive who shares our views about foreign policy. And so we're happy to be absolutely not even nonpartisan, beyond partisan, because that is really where the strength is. People who don't identify with either side, but I just identify with the idea of peace. As to why there are people who might want to be thought of as liberty-minded, nevertheless promoting war, the names that you brought out, I would definitely say are not in our camp. But I also think someone like Ted Cruz, who loves to pretend that he wants all the Ron Paul voters to vote for him, then he says things like he wants to make the sand glow in the dark in the Middle East. What a horrific Nazi-esque kind of statement. There are thousands of innocent people that would be killed if he tried something like this. So what is their appeal? I think Americans are very, very, very confused. We saw this recently just in the New Hampshire primary, where the anti-established candidates, regardless of their positions, all of a sudden came to the front. They're confused, and they have a sense that something is wrong, but they don't understand why. They don't understand that the Federal Reserve is printing the money for these wars and thus undermining the currency, making the 1% all the more richer, making the military-industrial complex and the banksters all the richer. The middle class and working class gets poorer and poorer. They don't understand it's the Federal Reserve's fault. They don't understand how the neocons are promoting war and getting wealthy doing it. They just see that their paychecks are shrinking due to inflation and other things. So, unfortunately, the mainstream media plays a great role in deceiving the American people. We don't really have a free press at least among the mainstream in America. And so they want to tell Americans, well, it's all the Muslims' fault. It's all the immigrants' fault. It's all the fault of these wimpy left-wingers who don't want to bomb everyone. And people, sadly, although thankfully we have the internet, we have organizations like yours and others who are promoting peace, but it's a very, very difficult thing to break through the propaganda bullhorn of the mainstream media in the United States.
Right, and considering the work that you've done with the Ron Paul campaign for president several years ago, what's preventing third-party candidates from challenging this establishment system, and what's stopping them from mounting powerful, viable campaigns that catch attention at a national level?
Well, I was actually in Ron Paul's congressional office on Capitol Hill, so I was not involved with the campaign per se, but I certainly was observing what was happening. And interestingly enough, after the 2008 campaign, Ron Paul got together the so-called minor party candidates, and they all sat down from Chuck Baldwin on the right to Cynthia McKinney on the left, whatever those two terms mean. They sat down and agreed on a set of basic principles on non-interventionism, on the Federal Reserve, and on deficit spending. And it was really a remarkable achievement, and that was sort of the model for what we wanted to do with the Institute, is to capture that idea. The problem for third parties in America is very simply money and lack of real democracy, for lack of a better term, in the United States. If you want to get on the ballot as a third party candidate, you have to spend millions of dollars just getting ballot access in the United States. And even if somehow you do that, you spend so much money getting on the ballot, then you've got to deal with the Republicans and Democrats, whether they'll let you in the debate or not. You won't even exist. The media will ignore you. So it really is one of the problems why there is no real debate in foreign policy. Imagine if in Congress there were 3 or 4 different parties. Imagine the kinds of coalitions that could build around certain issues. They may not all agree on one issue, but on other issues they would get together. You would really see a breakup of the stranglehold on the rest of us. But sadly, until there are some fundamental changes in the U.S. electoral system, I'm not very optimistic that we will be able to break out of their R's and D's.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for joining me today. Hopefully we'll have you on again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.